If you talk to somebody who's got, codependency issues or other trauma issues, including myself, when you start those affirmations, you just want to puke. You just want to, like, I'm likable. Ugh, oh God, that's so gross. It's like, that's the most stupid, disgusting thing I ever heard. This kind of toxic shame, unearned shame, this feeling of unworthiness or unlikableness, unlovableness that comes from trauma. It's nothing to do with anything that I ever did. It couldn't be anything that any 9-year-old ever did. So it doesn't make sense in that way. But I took that to mean there's something wrong with you, David. Something deeply, terribly wrong with you, and you'll never figure it out.
Today, I have David Deane Haskell. He's the author of Wounded Angels. I don't want to say a lot about the book at the beginning because I think it's something that we dig into deep. David is a US citizen living since a lot of years in Japan, but that's something that you will get in 2 weeks in the Whereabouts Tales episode. Today, we focus on the book, on the Wounded Angels. Again, thank you for accepting the invitation, David. Much appreciate your time.
I'm so glad to be here, Paul. This is really cool. And even though technical difficulties sometimes get in the way, it's still amazing to be able to do this across the world. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. I think that makes it even more interesting, right?
Oh yeah.
So, David was kind enough to send me the book up front so that I get to dig into it deep before this episode. David, you are thank you for that, by the way. You are very clear that this was not a self-help manual, not a therapy, not a traditional memoir. What did you want it to be instead?
Well, what I believe it is just a record of the work, a real-time accounting, if you will, of the inner child work that I was doing. So I say that it's not self-help because it's only what I did. It's not, it's not necessarily something that's going to work for somebody else. It's just something that I started writing, never intended to, never wanted to. I'm a sci-fi guy. I've written 5 sci-fi books. That's what I want to be known for. That's what I'm like aiming for. And it just turned out I was doing all this trauma healing, emotional and spiritual healing, which I had been doing for years before I wrote it down. And then just over the summer of 2024, coming about 2 years ago, I just started writing it. Every day I was doing the work and I was writing it as I was doing it. So it's a real-time record of what inner child work looks like. That's what it is.
Do you think it was important to write it as it was happening?
Yes, in the sense that I never wanted to write the book. That's the thing. I just kind of felt compelled to write it down. And that's, I honest to God, I was like, excuse me, as I was writing it, I'm thinking like, I don't want to do, what am I doing? I don't want to do this. I don't want to be a nonfiction guy. I don't want to be, a therapy guy, healing guy, any of that stuff. This was just what I was doing for my own self. But yeah, the real-time part of it did feel necessary. And I have a follow-up book, which is not published yet, which is more general. It took longer. For Wounded Angels, I wrote over the course of I think 6 weeks. It was just came out really quickly. And this follow-up book is more like the last 18 months. And I sort of was just continuing with the work, but the work itself had kind of slowed down too. At that time, I was doing the work every day and I had a lot of pain, a lot of healing to do. So it was just, and then over the last 18 months, it was more like I was traveling a lot, as we talked about, and triggers will come when you take yourself out of your normal situation and you put yourself in front of immigration officials or, foreign languages and all that kind of stuff. You're going to get stressed. You're going to get triggered. So I got kind of new insights and new things to dig into, but not on a regular basis so much. And so that book, which will come in a few months, it's called Inner Child Unleashed. And that's less of a in the moment book and more like a general, this is what my work looks like, the arc of it. But yeah, Wounded Angels, it just was because I was doing the work every day anyway. So I just started writing it every day, and every day it was something different. There was just a lot to unpack.
You jump into one of my next questions because I want to ask you if it would make sense to have written this book from a further clear perspective, a safer distance from what it happened. I think this is exactly what you are doing in your next book, right? You give a clear, yeah, I don't know if clear is the right term, but a more distant perspective than it was as it was happening.
Yeah, I mean that's what ended up happening with this second book, because I mean in the end I think it would be pretty boring if I mean if I wrote 8 books of like it's like I mean it may be for a psychiatrist to do the case study, but I mean there was also an arc going on at that time because I was dealing with my deepest um traumatic wound at that time. So it turned out, I mean that's what belongs in the book, and real time kind of also shows the ebb and flow of that work, because like some days I couldn't look at that. Some days, it was too deep. It was too
Mm-hmm.
painful, too overwhelming. And so there would be other stuff that would come up, really kind of stupid bullshit that would come up. Like I'd be like one chapter is all about how stressed out I got because I broke a toy lightsaber. Because I'm an adult, right? And I was borrowing a lightsaber from a guy, and even not even a friend. He's a client, and it's $200 lightsaber, and I dropped it and dinged it on the ground, and it was like all of a sudden the inner child was like, "Oh my god, we're in trouble. We've broken this thing, and like the grown-ups are going to be mad, and what are we going to do?" And and the adult inside me was kind of like, "Well, whatever. If the guy's angry, I'll buy him a new one or whatever." I mean, but that's not how the triggers work. And that the book talks a lot about that. It's like if you, as an adult, feel this oversized reaction to whatever, um, it's generally some kind of an indicator that there's some past stuff that you haven't looked at that much. So
You did not always, but often begin with a present day trigger, and I want to ask
yes.
you when did that process become something you trusted?
Um, mm, right off the bat when I started doing inner child work, I mean, so it all stemmed from recovery from addiction, recovery from substance addiction, recovery from codependency, people addiction. So those were 2 big ones for me. And from the codependency recovery work, I learned about inner child and how addressing, things in the past was important, but I didn't know how to access that stuff. Right. And there is the one, I don't know how much you've read, but the shame shocked boy, the main worst day of my life. Um, situation, that one was always with me because that was a memory that was burned into my soul from age 9. I never really forgot it. I didn't think about it every day, but it was always there. So I knew an inner child. There was a day in my life, I was 9, that was so, shockingly painful that it just, never went away. So there was that. But then that was only one inner child of all the different facets of me that were sort of stuck. And so learning that the triggers these days will, give you access to some deeper memory, um, started to make a lot of sense to me, because when I put the 2 together, I felt a little bit of peace. I started to feel a little bit of self-forgiveness. I started feel a little bit of self-compassion. Because like, no, you're not just a raving idiot who, yelled at the group because they didn't invite you to dinner. And by the way, this is another thing is I was always the scapegoat in my role in life was scapegoat. So I was always saying, yeah, it's all my fault. And if people said it's all your fault, I would agree with them really quickly. But what I came to realize is it's always a two-way street. We're always doing these different dances that, and often the other person doesn't see it. And I was in my type was the type that, I would be very compliant and very quiet, or maybe a little passive aggressive, but I would never really confront until I finally had enough, and then I would blow up. And then it would be easy to say, oh, David, he blew up. He's not to be taken seriously. But nobody looked at the weeks and months that led up to it, where there was like these little, you know, triggers that were being, yeah, exactly, that I wasn't reacting to, because again, that wasn't a normal reaction either, because if somebody's kind of not being okay with me these days, I'm okay with saying so before it gets to that point, because I'm not afraid that, oh my God, if I say this or that, I'm going to lose the relationship. It's like I have to do anything I can to make sure, because the thing of it is, I could not make or maintain friendships for the longest time. So it was so painful. Like if I would make a friend, I would just be like, how do I keep this friend? Because it was so lonely. So all of that was trauma based learnings that I had to really sort of unpack, look at, and unlearn. And so that's why it took a long time. And even, Wounded Angels is like this 27 chapters. And they're all related to these different types of situations that I was finally looking at after such a long time.
It's so interesting because I think not many people are recognizing this build-up and the cause of this build-up, and I think this build-up is so important to not to let it build up.
It is.
Like to see it as soon as possible and react on it, because as much as you let it build up, it will not do
Uh-huh.
anything else except just inflammate everything. And this, I mean this in the personal relationship, in the, I don't know, husband wife relationship, in the child parents relation, in all these relationships, you can make this association with all kind of relationship. It's always the same problem. This build up is making you go nuts just because you are not able to talk about the small things.
Right.
David, the loss of your mother is present through the book, even if you are not speaking of directly about it, but the presence is there.
Yeah.
How did that absence shape the way you understood safety, um, love, and maybe abandonment?
Um, yeah, I mean, so in so many ways. I mean, I don't have any memory of my mom. So she passed away when I had just turned 4. And I do have memories from before her death, but I don't have any memory of her. So, for whatever reason, maybe I blocked it out. I don't know. But so she was like a mythical figure for me. Like, because people would say, "Oh, your mother was so lovely. She was so wonderful." And
Uh-huh.
so for me, it was like, "Oh, she's like an angel or something like that." And oh, she loved you. And so I
Uh-huh.
kind of wanted to believe that, but I didn't have any evidence of it, you know. And so, there was that. And but then it also kind of defined me in unfair ways, such as the scapegoat thing again. It was always, if I acted out or had behavioral problems or whatever, oh, David, his mother passed away, and that's why David's, the way he is. But the adults around me, my dad was alcoholic, there was a lot of dysfunction all around me. Those adults weren't looking at their part in things, so it was easy. So it kind of like they gave me this definition, and so, not only me, but it was, you know, instead of the whole like, let's look at this current dysfunction and what's going on with everybody. It was easy to scapegoat me because my mother had died, right? So there was that too. And then the way that she died, which, and it's, people talk about like trigger warning and whatnot, but she died under tragic circumstances that I wasn't aware of until age 9. And so at that point, and it, I'm just talking about it because I talk about it openly. She had taken her own life. So that whole,
Oh.
she, she was an angel. She loved you, blah, blah, blah. It was like, all of a sudden it was like, well, wait, no, she left. Right? And this was the shame shock boy that had this. I didn't realize what a shame attack was back then. I was only 9, but now I see that this kind of toxic shame, unearned shame, this feeling of unworthiness or unlikableness, unlovableness that comes from trauma. It's nothing to do with anything that I ever did. It couldn't be anything that any 9-year-old ever did. So it doesn't make sense in that way. But I took that to mean there's something wrong with you, David. Something deeply, terribly wrong with you, and you'll never figure it out. So yeah.
I look at my 8-year-old, and
Mm,
I realize something. I realize that shame is not a feeling that one is born with, and
no.
I think most of the time is somehow inducted by the parents because they are ashamed of a different situation in which the child is bringing them. And I want to ask you, what do you think was the trigger for you to start knowing what shame means?
Um, well, I've always known it because of that, because of the incident. That I mean, I didn't have a label for it, but I've always known that horrible feeling of just I can say it's like it's very visceral, right? It's like in my body I can feel it, and I'm very aware of emotions now thanks to the inner child work. So I can feel an emotion and really separate. Like I'm feeling fear, and it's probably because the immigration guy is giving me the side eye, you know, um, and that kind of thing, but the emotions still are very powerful. They can take you over and shame is definitely one of those. And it's the kind of emotion that, you just want to get rid of, right? You just, I don't want to feel like this. I can't stand it. And so people tend to, not be able to identify it because they'll quickly do anything to make it go away, including people pleasing, or
Oh,
doing
yes.
other, these kinds of things. There's also, something people refer to as a fear of shame. It's like you don't even have the shame, you're afraid of how that feels, and so even before you feel the shame, you start doing anything to make sure that it doesn't happen. I mean, and you can see this with other emotions too. Like, people suppress anger because anger, I don't want to feel anger or anger gets me in trouble, so I suppress it. So they become kind of inward. They get stomach pain, they get passive aggressive things go on these instead of just allowing yourself to feel the emotion. So buried emotions can be very toxic, right? And really hurt you physiologically, psychologically, and all that stuff. So yeah, anyway, I kind of feel like I joke, but joking, but not joking. I might be one of the world's foremost experts on shame because I had such a visceral experience. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, I mean, it was just like 9 years old, just boom, like this, and it's been with me ever since, except, and I have to say, since roughly around the same time last year, and this is in the second book, and it did have to do with immigration in Indonesia, as a matter of fact. I did some really deep, work on shame, which was very effective, and so for the last year or so, I have to say it's been much, much, much less of a presence in my life, and it's in the book too, like what I did to largely get rid of it. And it had to do with a kind of a radical self-acceptance, but also a rejection of the judgment of everybody else. And this was, and I'll tell you what, I used ChatGPT to walk through this. It's a weird thing, right? I was like, just to get my thoughts in order, like how do I process this? Why do I feel like this, even though intellectually I know it's bullshit. Intellectually, I know that it's toxic, unearned, nothing to do with me, but I'm still feeling this horrible feeling. What do I do? And it had a lot to do with that. It's like I reject the judgment of everybody. Like this is not your jurisdiction. It's for me to decide whether I feel shame or not anybody else, not caregivers, not even, God himself. Weirdly enough, that kind of came up too. Yeah, so
What what is interesting for me is that most of the times is not even the external judgment. It's only the our feeling of how the external judgment could look like, and this
yes.
is all still something which is destroying you as a person. Like you're not,
Mhm.
I think is this is the fear of shame. I think we
Yeah,
if it's exactly what you said before. It's not, you don't get to leave that feeling or to experience that feeling, but you know it could come and you are already afraid of it because you knew it, you experienced it, and you didn't like it.
that's an amazing point. Absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, so I'd say in my experience, especially as an adult, probably 80 to 90% of it was just creations of my own mind. Like if, or if a situation starts to intensify, then that shame will come because I'm afraid of what it might look like. Yeah. So, and then, 10, 20% of actual people who will like do shaming and blaming behaviors, which is also not good and not healthy on their part, but I can see that very clearly these days, which is it almost gives me a smile when I had a client about a month ago who tried to shame me, like, who do you think you are kind of stuff. And I was just like, wow, this person's actually trying to shame me and asking if what my other clients think of what I said. And I was just like, oh, interesting. You are trying to shame me. And that was very
But it's
interesting. Yeah,
it's again an interesting situation because most of the times they are trying to shame you so that they are running away of their own shame that could come towards them.
he wanted to get away with not paying me enough.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. That explains everything. That explains everything. So, and this is something which is I have these discussions with my wife, and I always realize something, that always the people that are trying to shame you, trying to make you feel less of yourself, they are not there is nothing else than that feelings that they have on their own personality, and they try to push
Totally.
it away. And
Absolutely.
sometimes I really think this is what I'm telling my wife now all the time. I think they just need a hug. I think in most of the cases, these people, these persons just need a hug. Just someone has to hug them and tell them, you are enough. You're okay. You don't have to do more. You don't have to do that and that. You are okay. You're not ashamed. And I think this is something which is triggering so many I don't know if bad feelings or so many conflicts, so many. Yeah, we have the
Mm.
toddler in chief now in the US, so I mean that's the best example for that now.
Well, that's very talk. Yeah, and I won't go too far down that rabbit hole, but I do sense that that's a very unwell person with millions of enablers. And so from that viewpoint, although, yeah, I'm not going to go too down that rabbit hole, but I would
No, no.
say, to go back to the thing you said before that, though, the thing about you're enough and people need a hug, I agree, but it's very hard to hear when you're unwell, when you're in the depths of the self-loathing and that kind of thing. I mean, like, eh, I highly recommend affirmations, right? But I'll tell you, if you talk to somebody who's got, codependency issues or other trauma issues, including myself, when you start those affirmations, you just wanna puke. You just wanna I mean, it's like I'm likable. Ugh, oh god, that's so gross. It's like, that's the most stupid, disgusting thing I ever heard. And it's like, and yeah, it was just like that. There's one, and some affirmations go a little bit too far, but one word that I used to choke on was the word precious. Because sometimes they say, you're valuable and precious, and I'm like, oh, I'm not, but why not? What's wrong? Valuable and precious, yeah, great, cool. So aren't you? So isn't everybody? Why is it so hard to say? But it is hard to say, and it's hard to hear when you
It's
start.
interesting
Yeah.
how it's easier. It's harder to do affirmations on your personality, but it's to get your personality up, and it's much easier to take yourself down. Like to call
Oh,
yourself, I'm stupid, I'm not
oh,
likable. Oh, why are you an idiot? And this is like from the effect that they have on you. I think that the bad affirmation have much bad. I don't think that makes sense, but the bad statements
yeah.
have a bigger impact on yourself than the positive are trying to get back. So I think if you need to balance them, you need a lot of positive things that you have to say about yourself to
Yeah.
challenge the negative.
Yeah, that's one part of it. I agree. And also getting to the bottom of why you're doing that too. I often talk about like looking at things intellectually. Like I say, if you look at your inner child, if you look at your 8-year-old or your 10-year-old and you hate that kid, would you hate a different kid? Like, would you hate any other 8-year-old or, that kind of thing? Same thing with the way that we talk to ourselves. Like, would you talk to anyone else like that? Would you say, "Paul, you stupid idiot, I can't believe you screwed up this
Never.
podcast?" It's like I wouldn't dare. Not I wouldn't dare, but I also wouldn't want to, because I could be
Exactly.
really
Exactly.
hurtful. And the only person who might be harmed by that is someone who's very vulnerable and unwell, which is kind of who we are when we're doing that. But I had some moments with the facet formerly known as inner critic. That's what I'll say. Um, because when I connected with this facet of myself, this is inner child work in itself. When I connected with this inner critic, the first thing that I heard was, "Don't call me that. Like, don't you're judging me. You're being unkind to me. Why are you calling me a critic?" And I was like, "Oh my God. Well, what do you want me to call you?" He's like, "Call me David." Okay. Well, why are you being so harsh with me? And because if I'm not, you don't listen. You won't listen. Things keep going wrong, and I need you to pay attention because like we're in trouble. And it was, these are true external things, right? And so I one thing that I did was as an agreement of sorts, and I'm starting to sound schizophrenic here, but in doing this inner child work, it starts to sound really goofy, but it makes sense. And I said, "Well, what do you need me to do? Maybe I can check in with you every day and see how we're doing." And it's like, "Okay, yeah, cool." So I actually literally set an alarm on my calendar, as you said, like check in or something like that. It popped up every day at 11 a.m. and I sort of did some inner work. How am I doing today? How am I, and most days it was like, yeah, you're doing pretty good. You're doing all right. And I was just sort of like checking in with myself. So I didn't get to a point where things were starting to like blow up and I really did feel like I overwhelmed and whatnot and making mistakes. And then like the inner critic's like, "You idiot, you did it again." There's reasons why we do this to ourselves. There's logic to the subconscious that if you start to look at it and sit with it, um, it makes a lot more sense. But yeah, I talk to myself like so harshly sometimes, and I try really hard not to. And I'm much better than I used to be.
That's always important. But I think we all are in this situation, David. I think we all
Yeah,
are.
everybody does it. Everybody does it, and it's
Yeah,
crazy that we do it. And some of that comes from the childhood stuff too. I think.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Some of the words that you are calling yourself match words that you've been called as a child.
Hmm.
Because it's always easy. One of the most striking themes is that attention became safety in your, at least from what I read. And I want to ask you, so maybe a bit to give a bit of more context. You learned that if people applauded you, they were less likely to hurt you.
Yeah.
How much of that got into the writer?
I'd say not a lot because at the point that I started writing, and it's interesting, I had another conversation about this, and I had never really thought through the timeline. But what I realized about it was I was never able to be heard and understood vocally. And so I think the music was a way that I could be heard and understood expressively in a different way. And that
Oh,
went hand in hand with
nice.
the safety, as you mentioned, like the bullies were like, "Oh, Haskell, he plays piano pretty good. Check it out." And I would be like safe for a few days. Yeah, you read that chapter, right? And so a lot of that, yes. And it also helped me socially for a while. Like when I went to college and whatnot, I was in the marching band and, I had friends of a sort. I had a girlfriend and I was kind of popular. We did a lot of drinking, which was okay for a while. And like, I would be, having fun at a bar and, sort of have friendships, but then the substances started to overwhelm all of that. And so I destroyed relationships with drugs and alcohol. And so by the time I got to the real writing, I did some writing in college, but the first book I published, music was long since gone. I had lost all the music jobs because I was an excellent musician, but I was hard to work with. It was unpleasant because I was so, alcoholic and defiant and bitter. Um, and so the music had fallen. So I'd lost my dream. I'd lost the music and I'd lost any of that safety that came with that. And I was basically a hermit. So I was just, at the end and trying to find a way to make ends meet, maybe teach English or something, or, and oh, maybe I'll write a book. Maybe I can make some money at that. But what I realized and for a while I thought that, it was just like a career thing. But looking back, just this week, I realized that was my last ditch effort to be heard and understood. Because at that point, I was alone. I was isolated. I couldn't even play music anymore. All I could do is write it down and publish it. You wouldn't have to talk to me face to face. You know what I mean? So I think that was, at that point, it wasn't any kind of a connection that I thought I could make in that moment at all, but more like if I publish this, maybe someday somebody will hear me. And I don't mean for that to sound dramatic or anything. At this point, I'm very much surrounded by family and friends who like, love, and celebrate me, and I feel okay to say that. So I've come a long way, and you can see that in the book too. But at that time, it was very desolate. It was very desolate, and yeah, so writing, I think, was just like that.
You can only say that, but that's so interesting. But you can only say that if you are on a good place. I think you could never make the statement when you are still in the bad place. That's what
I
my feeling is.
No, I wouldn't have been able to have this conversation.
Even that, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that even that, yeah. You are describing in the book watching the Brady Bunch, and not because it was realistic, but because it showed a family where conflict did not end up in abandonment.
Hmm.
What did that fantasy give you as a child?
Still living vicariously through that, like, or maybe a fantasy of like someday I could have that, but I don't see how I would really get there unless I, got adopted. But I think it was just escapism, really. It was just like, um, it was a half hour where I was kind of part of a different family. We're like, and now that you mention it, the funny thing is, have you ever watched those YouTube things with like, behind the scenes with the Brady Bunch? Because that whole
No.
cast was dysfunctional as hell. It was funny. Like there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on behind the scenes. So little did see, which is so that's true to real life too. You see a family that seems like awesome on the outside, and maybe they are quite healthy, maybe they're not, but pretty much we won't know it, unless you really start to get to know them. So that's the really funny part about that. I was watching this idealized bunch of actors who themselves were a bunch of head cases. And like they tried to fire Mike Brady off the Brady's. Like the producer hated him. He was the worst actor to work with and all right. So, but yeah. Escapism. And I also kind of resented my stepmom and my dad because they would just be like, why are you watching that stupid crap again? That's not realistic. We should be arguing. It's like, I know arguing is realistic because I'm living it. And like that's kind of what happens in this house all the time is this realistic arguing, and I don't like it.
I've
So
said these stories. I've said this story a few times, but I'm watching David Ramsey. Most probably know him. I don't know if you know him. He's doing not a lot of financial content on YouTube and stuff like this. So
okay.
giving advices how to pay your debt and so on. But he has a nice story connected to this knowing your neighbors thing, because there was someone who's calling in the show because it's a radio show at its base. Is calling in the show and she's saying, yeah, I'm 30. And I keep seeing on Instagram these pictures of people having big cars and having millions of dollars in the account. And I'm 30 and I feel like a failure because I don't have all that. I just have a normal job. I'm making good money, but still I feel like a failure. And he said, honey, it's like back then when I was a child, we had Keeping Up with the Jones because the Jones family was living down the street from us.
Yeah.
And we also have seen when Mr. Jones was having a fight with Mrs. Jones. And we also have seen when Mr. Jones was kicking his kids. But now you don't see it on Instagram because on Instagram, you only see the positive. So you don't know what's behind the positive.
Right. So it's that's true. When you're talking about neighbors and people that you can get some sense of what's going on.
Exactly.
But these days, everything is, even what we're doing right here, we're in the frame, man. Let me tell you, beyond this frame, the room is a lot messier. You know what I'm saying? And that's right. And it's funny because I hope I didn't upset this one guy. I did a podcast and I put we were doing this pre-recording chat about, okay, we can cut this all out in the post-production or whatever. And I actually just stuck it up on my Substack, warts and all, just for the hell of it. I hope he wasn't mad when he watched it. But it's like, I mean, exactly that, right? Like everybody with the picture of the wing of the airplane and all that. And I was doing a lot of that last year too. When I was traveling, I was in Bali. I was on the beautiful islands of Thailand, and I was grateful and enjoying the experiences, but I was also very deeply grieving. I had just got divorced. I had left, my home of many, many years, Japan, to travel for financial reasons mainly. I didn't particularly want to be on the road. It's just like seemed like an affordability thing. And then my dad passed away late in the year. So like the whole year was grieving. And I didn't even realize it in the moment. Sometimes I was kicking myself and say, "Oh, you're not grateful enough. You're on a beautiful beach. You should be more grateful." But I mean, I was grieving. I was in a heavy space. But I was, posting those beach pictures, from because part of it, yeah, is humble bragging, sure. But then part of it also was connection. And I wanted my friend, see where I'm at. I want you to share this with me. I kind of wish you were with me because it was somewhat secluded most of the time. But yeah, I mean, there you go. Like we're all doing that. And this is the world we live in is bizarre in so many ways. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you said something really interesting there. I have to go a bit on that rabbit hole because you said I was missing my friends, and I made posting the pictures like with secluded places to think, okay, I wish you would be here with me. But it would be interesting to ask them how they saw it, because in most of the cases you see a lot of oh, he's just doing that to make us jealous that we are not there.
I
Maybe not in your case.
yeah, well, maybe the Facebook friends. I don't know, but my close circle of friends are reasonably healthy people like myself, and we talk a lot more than I think a lot of people do. And so I actually expressed some of that. And the other thing too is they were in Japan, and so I was sort of making them jealous all winter. But then when the cherry blossom season came in Japan, which is I absolutely adore, it's my favorite thing in the world, and I was missing it. And I was in like Vietnam, and they sent me the picture. They said, "Now we can make you jealous," and they sent me the pictures. And so it was a little bit of that, but yeah, I was happy that they could enjoy it too. So yeah, interesting.
You are writing openly in the book about addiction,
Yes.
uh, about the compulsive behavior, about all kind of addiction. If it's food, alcohol, porn, doesn't matter. It's still the same escapism that we are that everyone that is addicted tries to do. What changed when you stopped treating those as proof that you were broken?
So that was reinforcing my brokenness. Okay, yeah, and yeah, okay. So what changed when I was not doing that anymore? Oh, yeah, it's an amazing question. Actually, that's such a deep and complex question. I understand why it's hard to phrase it. I'm not even sure how I would phrase it either, but yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I love it. I really love it. In fact, I don't know that I've ever thought about this question. Because yes, that's the addiction does tend to reinforce. Yes, I am a worthless piece of shit, and that's kind of the nature of how addiction goes. And it's interesting what changed when I stopped. So there was really two phases of getting well. The first one was getting rid of the substances. Um, because that was just killing me. I was gonna die very soon. I was 100 pounds heavier. I thought I was having a heart attack a couple times. I was doing all kinds of like deadly things. So that was the first part, but then I was still like really deeply in the codependency, relying on others for my own sense of self-worth. So I still felt broken. And I still felt like, I can't, as long as I have you directing my life, maybe I'll be okay, but me on my own, never. And so I still was, I didn't feel like a whole person. And then in the end of that, when I was able to address both of those sides of the coin. And I started to uh, look at just who I am today. And okay, now I'm not actively doing harm. I'm not, making my daughter suffer because I had a 13, she was 12, 13, 14 years old at the end of my um, substance addictions. And I was harming her. When you're an addict, you harm everybody. And so, I wasn't, but so it was easy to condemn myself. Um, and in that case, I was doing harm that needed to be addressed desperately. And alcoholic dad, so I know both sides of that. My dad was alcoholic. So, once I wasn't doing that active harm anymore, and the people addiction, I wasn't, I felt like I was doing harm, but that was again, codependency is totally, it's a mutual dance kind of thing. It's, I wasn't really doing very much harm except to myself and just unwell people kind of stressing each other was the main thing. But I still felt really horrible about it because my behavior was not what I wanted it to be. My reactions were not what I wanted them to be. I felt like a crazy person all the time. And I thought, I'm even after I quit all the drugs and alcohol, I still can't be okay. What the hell's wrong with me? So, that got really dark there. And then so once that stuff started getting addressed, and then I could see um, in a concrete way, like I my behavior was fine today. I helped a few people. I showed up at work. I didn't fly off the handle. I was pretty stressed on the inside, and I went through a lot of emotions, but I did okay. I'm not such a bad human being. I even seem to be healing, and this is over weeks and months and years, right? So it takes time, and it's very painful. I'm not the guy to say there's going to be a quick fix and let it go and you'll be fine. Sad to say, but that's why I'm not selling 8 million copies yet because I think there's a lot of those people out there, and I don't tend to, I don't think they're full of shit necessarily, but it wasn't my story, So it took a long time, but I had to address those things first.
I think yes, there is no easy fix, but I think there are two hard ways that you could go on as a person being in that situation. Either you go on as you are doing it until you did until that moment, and that's hard because that's not easy. Either you try to fix it, which is also hard. You just have to choose your heart because there is no easy way.
So I've heard that, like, people talk about the gym versus the getting heavy, right?
It's
And
the same thing.
yeah, pick your poison. Like, do you either want to suffer at the gym or do you want to suffer from a bad back? And I'm actually going through that right now because I took a fall about a month ago, and I'm fine, but I really messed up my back. And what I realized was my back is really weak, and I've got a lot of belly fat and a lot of bad back fat. I'm not overweight, and I do cycling every day, so I've got the cardio, but still, there's a lot of weakness there, and it's starting to become painful. And I'm 55 years old, so it's like, okay, well, I have a choice now, and I'm either going to address it one way or the other, and I'm going to pick which pain. And so I went through a lot of pain in the healing process. And for some people, it's like I don't want to go there. My discomfort is not that bad. I can live with it. I don't want to go through the therapy, or I don't want to go through this. And for some people, that's okay. For me, it was just too painful. I could not live like that. Just couldn't.
Absolutely. Everyone has to do their choices, but I think it's hard both ways. Even though we don't like to admit it, I think it's still hard both ways.
It is, yeah.
David, you're right that understanding may be more useful than willpower.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean in real life?
Understanding may be more valuable than willpower. I don't think about willpower all that often, like in terms of, you know, I think, and again, so we've talked about addictions here, and I'll openly say I do keep an eye on myself because, like, porn, coffee, sugar, you name these things that, like, unhealthy, self-soothing, whatever you want to call it, that, I'm no saint, and I am open to the idea that I might really need to address more things in my life, and the main thing I look at is like, is this ruining my life? And so far, not really, but I do drink way too much coffee these days and like my stomach hurts and that kind of thing, right? Okay, yeah, you and me both, right? But when it comes to willpower and that kind of thing, I think like that, mindfulness and self-care for me. And this, if you have a full-blown addiction, which I did, um, you got to address it more radically, I think. But when it comes to the other stuff, for me, I'll tend to lose weight and get healthier when I'm, kind of gently taking inventory on and where I'm at and like why I'm stress eating or what's going on in my life that's driving me to like the extra bag of potato chips and that kind of thing for me. And again, I'm not thinking I don't think I'm a compulsive overeater. I don't think I have an addiction there, and I could be wrong. I'm trying to be as open-minded as I can about that stuff because I don't want to delude myself. I spent decades doing that. My alcohol is not that bad. Who doesn't drink 15 or 20 beers, right? Who doesn't like try to drink a table of Japanese people under the table, as out of a matter of pride, you know.
But I don't have a problem.
But yeah,
That's the statement.
exactly. So yeah, and that's so willpower. I think awareness is more the key for me. But I I ebb and flow with the indulgences. I'm not like a marathon runner guy who's like on a really tight um regime, and so I look at that stuff, but I do tend to find that stuff does um come up more and more when I have a lot of overwhelming inner child work that either I need to do it or I'm doing it. And I'll often get exhausted from that, and I'll often just kinda, like, collapse from that, and then it's just like, "Oh god, I need a coffee to stay awake." These kinds of things, I give myself a lot of, leeway on that stuff because I do find that I am doing a lot of overwhelming work. And even now, like, now that I've wrote the book and I'm out talking about it, I really love these connections, but they're also very draining for me. To be talking about this stuff is kind of reliving it in a way. And so, if I'm kind of overindulging in this or that tomorrow or next week, I kind of know where it's coming from. And then I address it by making sure to get down to the beach and do some cycling and get some, meditation in or reflection. I don't really meditate, but reflection, prayer, me time, um, time with close friends that I really can trust and talk to, all these kinds of things that are healthy self-soothing because there's unhealthy self-soothing stuff and then there's healthy self-soothing stuff and we do need that. We need something. We're not robots.
The sum of the unhealthy habits has to stay constant. You have to have some things that you have like guilty pleasures, and yes, you have to keep it as healthy as possible or as not damaging as possible. But you have to have something for sure.
Enjoyment. Yeah, I mean some people really enjoy tobacco in moderation. Some people really enjoy whatever. Um, yeah, me too. I eat an ice cream pretty much every day, maybe 5 times a week. But I never eat two. I used to be 100 pounds heavier, and I would eat 5 ice creams if I felt like it. And that was I came to realize over time. I mean that was like the alcohol was bleeding into other things.
Absolutely,
But I mean, do I eat too much ice cream? Probably a little bit, but that's all right. you know.
I like it. I like
Yeah.
it as well. It's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. Um, David, there is a quiet but powerful line in the book where one of your inner childs tells you love your daughter. Um, what did that moment mean to you?
Could you give me a little more context? The inner child said, "I love my daughter.
No, the inner child is telling you love your daughter.
Please love your daughter." Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, the thing about that is, and I if you could send me the page number too, I'd love to go back and read it later, but at some later time. But I'm sure that what I was talking about was, um, I realized I had a problem because of her. Like the the realization that I was just completely powerless over, stopping was the realization that I couldn't quit for her sake, and like the complete confusion over that because I love her. I always have. She's amazing. She's very wise. She's a great kid. I'm not even a kid. She's 22 years old. But we had lunch yesterday. We're going to some amusement park with Pokemon on Monday. And it's an essential relationship for me. And I wanted to be a good dad, and a dad who showed up, a dad who could, be a guide in these kinds of things. And I wasn't being any of those things. So, for the pained inner child who was feeling that his father wasn't showing up for him, it makes so much sense that, just love her.
As a father, talking from the a father to father point of view, how do you support your child without trying to control, to fix, or to rescue
Mm,
him or her?
her, yeah. As with everything, I can only speak for myself, but and my daughter's 22 years old now, so she's an adult and she can make her own decisions. I do notice, so my ex-wife, who I care about very much, um, is also was involved in a codependent relationship with me and, struggles with these things. And so I see her mom tries to control her a lot, even though she's 22 years old. And it bothers my daughter, and my daughter comes to me and talks to me about it. I have no idea if either of them will ever watch this, but if they do, hopefully they'll hear this in a compassionate way. I'm not trying to condemn or anything, but it does concern me because, like, yeah, okay, she's 22 years old, she's an adult, and like, being controlling is just pressure and whatnot. So, but I can't sit there and say, "Well, your mom's wrong or your mom's dumb or whatever, don't do that." But I do say, um, it I can hear you. Like when my daughter complains about it, I say, I hear you. I hear what you're going through. I try to see all angles of it, but I also say to her, "You're an adult. In my view, you can make your own decisions." She does live under her mom's roof. So I said, "Well, there's two different things in these dynamics, right? There's the parent, which doesn't necessarily go away when you're an adult, but adults are adults. But then there's if you're living under somebody's roof, then you kind of have to follow their rules, right?" And so she said, and I said, "But your option is you could move out, right? If you want to. Like you're 22 years old. If you live under her roof, yeah, she tells you the rules. And if you don't want to, you have the option of moving out." So, these are all things that I'm just trying to lay out the options for her and let her make her own decisions. And that's the way that I show up for my daughter as an adult. As a for with kids, it's different because, of course, because you said your kid is how old? 8?
8, yeah. He's
8,
gonna
yeah,
become
it's
8
a
this
whole
year.
whole different story, right? And then there's we do have to guide them, we have to lead them. But I also think kids are wise, and kids have opinions too, and kids can sense when things are dysfunctional. So if you I was always quick when she was a teenager to admit when I was wrong. And some parenting experts might disagree with that. And again, but yeah, I was like, I really was not fair to you, and that wasn't okay. So yeah, but I mean, yeah, the parent child relationship is the one dynamic that's so complicated too. I do try to be very careful that I don't have any kind of manipulative or codependent vibes with my daughter, which but we all make mistakes. I indulge her way too much. I give her lots of money and to spoil her, and whatever. I spoiled her yesterday. I had fun spoiling her yesterday because I know she's struggling with money a little bit. She just got a new job. So I walked up and said, "Oh, did you get paid yet from your new job?" She's like, "No." I'm like, "Oh, here's $50. You need you need money. You need to get paid." And then I had fun with that. And maybe that's a little bit overindulgent, or maybe she needs to learn this or that, but whatever. we do what we can.
Absolutely. You kind of are my kind of guy. So I try I try to let him make his decisions, even though he's eight sometimes, not always, but sometimes, because I think the power of trusting in your own decision is important. And somehow is getting down the level of needed acceptance from the others, because at the end you don't have to ask me if you can do that or that. You should be able to see it. But yeah, well, it's a long way. It's complicated. They don't. I keep saying this. They don't come with a user manual. They just are coming to us, and we try to make the best of it. I think. I don't want to say all of them, but I think most of the parents are. They have a good intention, and even if we do
Yeah, yeah.
mistakes sometimes.
Well, yeah, and nobody's perfect. We make mistakes, and I don't have any
Absolutely.
resentment towards my dad. I know, and as I said, I know both sides of the coin of being, addicted and trying to parent. Um, but it's okay to acknowledge that we can do harm, even if it's not intentional. That's the thing, and that's something I think people need to address when they do fly off the handle and yell at the kid. Then and they know they were wrong. It's like, well, I'm not going to say that because it's a kid. I don't get that. I think that's not the right way to go, But I've seen that school of thought too. That like the parent needs to be right and the kid needs to know that and these kinds of things. But
I think it's interesting that we expect from kids a grown-up behavior, but we treat them differently.
right, yeah,
That's one of the biggest issues that I have. Like, you cannot do that. You're a kid. You're not do that. You don't talk to him like with a normal human being. You talk to him like he's, I don't know, a different person. But you expect his behavior to be of a grown up, and that doesn't
mm,
match for.
yeah, makes sense.
Um, David, the title came late, and you question whether calling these younger selves angels was too generous. What made you keep it?
Um, yeah, interesting question. I've actually had some people tell me that it's a bad title and that it'll never sell with that title, and we'll see. But I didn't name the book. One of the inner child came up with that, and that's one part of it. I think all kids are angels too, and that's the thing. It's like most of the stuff that I'm addressing, all of it happened before age 14. Most of it happened before age 10. And it's like, if an 8-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 4-year-old isn't an angel, then what is? Right? So, yeah, that's to me, Wounded Angels made a lot of sense, it still does. And I did part of my healing had to do with, recognizing the ages that I was, because when I looked back and condemned myself for things, I was condemning an adult, something I did when I was 10, like, can't believe you said that or did that, and, or
Mm-hmm.
even, I don't know if it was in the book, but I did have, I was abused, sexually abused at age 14. And I, at the time, and even for a long time, condemned myself for that and said, well, I was 14. I wasn't a baby. I was, I was willing participant, that kind of thing. No, I wasn't. I was I might have been younger. The oldest I would have been was 14. Might have been younger. And so, like, for the longest time, I was like saying, "What's wrong with you? You gross, you gross person for getting in on that." And no, I was abused by an adult. So, these kinds of things, the recognition of that was really important. So, yeah, Wounded Angels.
That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense to keep them like this. I think, as I said before, we are mm, mm, somehow thinking that we are grown ups from the beginning.
Yeah,
When you're, yeah,
yeah.
it's hard. David, what do you hope that someone carrying shame reads in this book and takes away with him in his life?
That there is hope that they can heal. Um, I'm hoping this book it just inspires to find our own way, because I did it in a very personal kind of, the David way. Like I didn't go to a therapist necessarily, although I did do peer therapy in a sense. Like and the person who wrote the foreword is one of the people that I did a lot of outreaches with, and sharing experiences with, that kind of thing. So yeah, inspiration and the hope that yes, you can feel better, you can heal. Healing is it was unthinkable to me. I never thought I'd get to this point, and even now I still feel like I've got a long way to go. But I feel so much more at peace with myself and so much more accepting and loving of myself. So that's what I hope people will get from the book. And, yeah.
Finishing with hope is a great way to finish this conversation. I love it. David, I told you in the previous discussion, which will go after live after this one, but I feel the need of saying again, your story is impressive, and reading the book, somehow you think that you're reading fiction because you cannot think that everything happened in that way. So that was at least my feeling. Thank you for giving the chance to talk to you, to tell your story, to present the book, to tell your expert story. I appreciate a lot the time that you gave me.
Paul, first of all, we did two very different conversations, and I'm really appreciative for both of them. Super grateful for it. I hope we can talk again. In fact, the Inner Child Unleashed will come in a few months, and we can talk about that or whatever you like to. I really enjoy these conversations.
Absolutely.
And yeah, just thanks for doing what you do. It's really great to connect.
Thank you so much again for your time. All the links to your book will be in the show notes description, either on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you are listening to this. I will be more than happy if you contact me and tell me, okay, Paul, I have a new one. Let's talk about it.
Awesome.
I would be extremely happy. And looking forward to talk to you next time, David.
Me too. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.